So the packet I just handed out has some goal planning templates that we'll go over in a moment that will connect with our main topic for tonight, developing students' positive self-image as college-bound students. So my name's Gabe Moreno. I work in the building as academic support supervisor and I coordinate the AVID program. Any questions about AVID, I'm happy to help and field. And what I'm sharing with you tonight is a summary of some of AVID's brain science research and their planning for, and their templates for goal setting. So, as we're talking tonight about our students going to college in the future, we're really kind of considering how we're going to esteem, support, and help them along their journey and into their path towards college, starting planning from a really early stage here at middle school. But we also think that that's a great thing to do, start planning early. And so in tonight, my goal is that by the end of this presentation, you'll have a greater understanding of the science of brain communication, of the brain science behind communication in a developing brain, but also that you'll have some strategies for implementing some goal setting in a mutual setting with your students. So, to begin, I just wanted to share a couple quotes, but especially this bottom one. When we're thinking about communication and brain science and adolescence, one of the AVID educators in California has this great quote, "We feel, therefore we learn." And as we talk about the developing brain and three different parts of the brain, what I hope to emphasize is that at this age, it's very, very common for the decision making to come from an emotional part of the student's brain rather than the cause and effect, big frontal cortex part. And as we think about our students' futures, sometimes that can be stressful. I know that when I was in middle school, when I was in high school, I stressed out about many, many things. And something that helped me in my understanding of stress was that stress is really an evolutionary advantage. It's something that is important, and it's how we deal with stress and different types of stress that can help us navigate the developing brain and building up this consciousness that we need to stay focused and setting goals towards college while at the same time not feeling overwhelmed by something very far away. So I think of Aesop's fable about the ant and the grasshoppers. The gist of the fable is that the grasshoppers spend all summer playing, having fun. They have no food when winter rolls around. The ants are very industrious, keep working throughout the summer. They don't enjoy themselves, but when winter occurs, they're prepared. And so, in some ways, that's kind of a good rule of thumb for when our students are feeling stressed, or when we're feeling stressed about our students. We know, or we can ask ourselves, is my stress valid? And really, as long as it's within the control, as long as it's within our control, then that stress can be a productive motivator, and it's appropriate. When the stress is out of our control, grand scheme things, determining what major, what Ivy League, right now, today, this year, that's a little out of our control, and that's not something I would endorse feeling stress about. But certainly valid to consider the steps and experiences of our students today, knowing that they will build up towards their college experience. So I just wanted to share that about stress as we get into the first main point in developing our students' positive self-identity as college-bound students. And I'll reframe the question. In other words, what we're going to be talking about in just a moment is how do we effectively develop a healthy level of stress in our students? Because there is a healthy level of stress that can be balanced and felt. Are there any questions before we go any further? So our first learning target is to help make sure that we all have a general understanding of some basic brain science about communication. Oversimplified, three main parts of the brain that we'll talk about. The brain stem, which is the reptilian brain, and this is what people talk about when they talk about fight or flight complexes. those really strong reactions that we just have when there's a big stimulus. The very core of our brain, the limbic system, is where we have our emotions, our feelings, and that's kind of a strong component of the social part of our brain. And the third component is that front part, the neocortex. The neocortex is the part that's going to be able to determine cause and effect. And that is an ongoing development in the body through for about 20 years. And so, in a simplified context of what our brains are doing, three main functions are the primitive survival, the socializing in the core, and problem solving in the front part of the brain. And then something that's important is that the way that the messages in the brain connect are by little nerve endings sending a message from one nerve ending to the other. And what's important to know here is that, technically it only does one thing. These little neurons aren't making great big decisions, but they're saying activate or don't activate. And it's important to note that sometimes chemical levels associated with stress, or if someone was intoxicated, that would be another kind of, a different type of interrupter, but chemical levels like stress can interrupt messages. Other chemicals that our brain releases when we're happy and relaxed, like dopamine, actually can help speed messages and help increase the reception of messages. So that reptilian part of the brain, the base part, is primitive survival, and all of us are born with this. This is the type of thing that if in the middle of the night you hear a loud noise, that's the part of your brain that activates. And it's going to tell you, when that part of the brain activates, it's telling you to shut down all of the deep thinking. We don't have time for deep thinking. We have to act, we have to respond. And shutting down that prefrontal cortex then kind of eliminates or hinders the ability to make a really conscious decision. There's some survival experts that say the best plan you can make when you're surviving is the moment you realize you're in an emergency. Because every moment after that you'll be a little more tired, a little more stressed, and your decision-making capability goes down. The people who survive survival instances typically make a plan and stick through with it, and follow through with it regardless of the fatigue or the tiredness. So, what kind of things activate the reptilian brain? Well, it's activated when the brain perceives a threat. So, real brief story about yelling. Yelling can be completely appropriate at times. I know, just as a quick story, that when your reptilian brain is activated, it can shut down the learning part. I have a really vivid memory of my dad yelling at me once, and me saying, "Oh, I don't really like being yelled at." And the voice got louder and explained that he wasn't yelling yet, and I would know if he was yelling. I have no idea what that lesson was about. But I'm 27 now, and I remember the instance. It's anecdotal, but to me that was one of my experiences of that moment when reptilian brain shuts down. And this communication information will be important for our process of the goal setting we'll do with our students later. So the question then is, as far as communication patterns, yelling, harsh tones, frustration, how we share that. When is it developmentally appropriate and when is it situationally appropriate? If you see your student in danger, you better yell. That's completely fine. Hand on a hot stove, a child walking into traffic. And I think a lot about the phrase, "Don't you know better?" We all start with the core of our brain, that limbic emotional system, intact. We all start with the core of with the stem of our brain and the fight or flight response to sharp communication, yelling, harsh tones. We start with that all ready to go. The decision-making part of our brain develops over time. And it's important to note then that, you know, if you consider like a little league baseball, the don't you know better kind of response. In my opinion, it's not necessarily helping develop the cause and effect in that prefrontal part, rather it's hindering the communication by shutting it down. And, you know, at older ages, sometimes they do know better, and it is appropriate to use that phrasing, to use that language. But what's a challenge is that while the prefrontal cortex is developing, the student has a tougher time recalling the learning that has happened previously. And so that brings us to really the core motivating part for the age of most of our students here at Valley View, is that they're relying heavily on the limbic system, the core of the brain, for all of their communication, also their feelings and how they're interacting with others. And it's important to note that those social interactions at this point in our students' lives is the biggest motivator they have. And that brains don't, brains compensate, they don't correct. So the fact that the problem-solving part of the brain is up front, and that's right now not fully connected to the whole emotional part of our brain, well, the brains don't know that. So they compensate by making those critical decision-making through other sections of the brain, especially this social and emotional section of the brain. And so that's why in our students, some of the biggest things that we hear are concerns about fairness, concerns about equalness, concerns about what their friends are doing or what the motivation is, or what class they really want to sign up for because they know that they have a great relationship with someone else who signed up for it. And so during that brain development, as our brain's developing, that's a pretty natural moment. And hopefully with the goal-setting templates that we'll go over in a little bit, we can help have some constructive conversations with our students about how to move past this and begin working more so on decisions based off of future goals. So I use an analogy, a little photo of the game Lemmings, the idea of one little person following another little person, not noticing what happens to the person in front of them, but still following along. Kind of like the old idiom about if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off too? Well, at this age, they're more likely to jump off than any other age. And a big part of that is that the giant motivation, again, because it's where the decisions are operating from is the social part, is this need for social survival. There's a lot of research into public speaking being more feared than death, and that research has kind of indicated that one of those reasons is that the fear of public speaking is really a fear of ostracism or a fear of social death by standing up, speaking out, sharing an opinion that's less popular, less valid, or different from others, and then not being part of a group because of that. And thousands of years ago, that could have meant death to an individual, to be kicked out of a group. Here, it's not a literal death, but it's kind of a social death. And so in all of that, while the student is using that emotional, feeling, communicative part of the brain, animosity, anger, negativity can lead somebody to disengage. As I mentioned before, there are going to be circumstances where that's essential. Anytime there's a concern about immediate danger, definitely just go for it, yeah. But really, some of that negative communication can kill motivation. And so what I want to, as we get to the goal setting, we'll talk about ways that we can phrase the goals in a mutually agreeable way so that hopefully there's buy-in from both parties. The reason that this is really important is that when you have a strong emotional connection with somebody, and as parents and guardians, you're going to have a strong emotional connection with your child, whether they acknowledge it or not. I know I was a little bit of an angsty teenager, so I didn't necessarily acknowledge that to my parents until later on. But we still had it. And when you have that emotional connection with someone grounded in support, trust, caring, those type of communications actually give us a positive feeling that's tangible at a chemical level, because when we're happy, we release dopamine. And dopamine in the brain actually helps messages be received into other parts of the brain, and helps build pathways from that communication part, feeling part in the center, into the prefrontal cortex. And a lot of research has shown that positive relationships build resiliency, and is especially beneficial for anybody who's challenged or struggling, because it's those relationships, especially at this level, that generate hope. And the hope then can very often become the motivation for the goals that we will be setting with our students. I have given a ton of information very quickly. We'll conclude the third part of the brain about the developing decision-making part, then talk about the goal setting. But I wanted to check what thoughts, concerns, questions, or any clarifications that we have at this moment.
A comment that my son uses fairly frequently is,
Yeah.
stop yelling at me.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not yelling.
Yeah. And it's such a challenging thing. I worked as a host once at a restaurant, and it was a relatively fancy restaurant, and I tried really hard at the end of my evening, as a guest was leaving, to say, in a real formal tone, "Thanks for coming in, we hope you enjoyed your evening." And my boss stepped over to me one day and said, "Gabe, when people leave with that message, they're not hearing, 'Thanks for the good evening.' What they're hearing is, you've got a lack of enthusiasm." And a simple change in, "Thank you, have a good evening." As artificial as that was for me, and how different that was from how I was trying to be respectful to them, it made a difference. And I know that when I worked in Minneapolis, very frequently I had students that commented, "Mr. Moreno, I don't like your tone." And it was a challenge, because the message had to be stated. I was trying to state it in a firm manner, in a clear delivery. I guess all I could say from my experience was I had greater success changing my style than trying to impress upon those students in Minneapolis, my way of communicating is correct. And potentially, and I don't think you're yelling. That's not what I'm hearing, and that's not what I want to insinuate. But if it's being perceived that way, perhaps a slight change in tone is something that'll be beneficial, if for no other reason than it acknowledges the feeling that they have. Because that's what they're making their decisions off of, is their feelings. Not off of, they know that mom and dad want the best for them, and that mom and dad are looking out for them. But that's literally a disconnected part of their brain. And it's really about the emotion. Any other thoughts? I appreciate you for sharing. And so, all of this is important because, tragically, your students' decision-making part of your brain is going to not be complete until they're in their mid-20s. So even when they're in college, you're still probably going to have that moment. I know I certainly did, of the pushback on parents without always acknowledging the best cause and effect relationship, or the best cause and effect decision that we could possibly make. And so I just wanted to include this graphic as well to kind of give a representation of K-5, middle school, high school, graduating high school, college. The blue is the very, very denseness of the brain. It's a mapping of density. And the more dense, the more strongly developed, and the more active and accessible it is. And so the purpose of this is just to identify that this prefrontal cortex, that decision-making part, we can watch in minds that it takes a long time to develop. It is, however, growing daily, and while it's growing, it's not completely connected, which challenges the ability sometimes for learned material to be recalled, and that's a big part of why repetitions are necessary. One thing we try and do in our curriculum at Valley View, and especially in our AVID curriculum at Valley View, is encourage, insist, and in AVID even grade the repetitions that students take on notes, the different types of interactions that we see on Cornell notes. You take notes in class, after class, you ask questions that the notes answer. Later that week, you write a summary that answers your questions. But in the meantime, you can also go back and add other information and collaborate using that social part of the brain with peers on what did I miss? What did you get? And then they have their study questions that they can refer to. And I have lots of information on Cornell Notes. If anybody needs it, I have my contact information I'll share at the end. But that is something that we've emphasized in our classes and in our professional development, is trying to increase the amount of repetitions, because we know that without repetitions, we're not aiding the brain in its development of fully recalling the cause and effect part and the deep thinking, critical problem solving part of it. So, that's great. Kids' brains are going to be developing into their mid-20s. Right now they're making social decisions, not cause and effect decisions, and aggressive tones can shut down higher order thinking. So where does that leave us in developing students' positive self-identity as college-bound goers? For me, as we come back to how to effectively develop healthy levels of stress in our students, a rephrasing of what I just said, there's a few key takeaways that will guide us into the goal-setting templates I have to share with you. Always acknowledge incremental growth. And our students are also, in that incremental growth, are going to backslide at times. That's normal, that happens, but celebrating that incremental growth along the way is an important step in building that affirming, validating relationship. Especially when it comes to resiliency and persistence. Sometimes it's not, we had a History Day competition here about 2 weeks ago, and my biggest message to the students that came and competed was, I'm glad you finished. Because being able to finish and feel good that you finished is an important part. Never feeling like you're able to finish because it's not good enough is perfectionism. And perfectionists fail just as much as people who don't try, because they're afraid to try. And so I love the relationship of we can do this, the mutual, because it is that social emotional part that's going to make, that's going to be the motivator. We can do this isn't meaning I will do this for you. We can do this is often just I will provide you emotional support as you are struggling through. I will help you determine who you should contact if you have a question, or the best mode of contact. Teachers love emails. Teachers are good with phone calls, and teachers are happy to have students come visit. A lot of times though, and again, something we work on in the building is our teachers developing positive relationships with their students. It's not always natural. And different teachers and different students will have different personalities. Sometimes sometimes a student might require that encouragement of, well, we really need to see this teacher so that they can have that positive experience. Also, include your students in planning processes, whether it's grocery shopping for the week, or the activities on vacation, or, as we look at in a little bit, thinking about college, thinking about GPA, thinking about short-term and long-term goals, including them in that is an important part so that they learn how to plan. Because since that cause and effect part isn't naturally developed in our students, it's something that needs to be taught. And with Avid, as I try and do goal setting with students, I like to talk about my hopes and dreams for them in very general terms. I hope you find success in a passion of yours after attending a 4-year university. I never tell a student, oh, you have to go to Ivy League, even when it's somebody who's a great candidate for that. And I never say, you know, maybe a 2-year college is better for you, because even if a 2-year college is better for somebody, I prefer they come to that conclusion. So I try to leave the specifics out. I try to fill in general terms and ask questions to lead students to their specifics. And very lastly, especially in goal setting, really work on that positive affect. And it'll go a long way by helping boost the chemicals in the brain that make the student feel good, that make them more encouraged, more willing to follow through with this goal that you'll set mutually. Any other questions or comments before we conclude with the 2 goal setting templates? Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Alright, so our second learning target. Participants will have 2 templates and strategies for developing students' prefrontal cortex through social and causal thinking. So when you set goals with students, keep it relational, keep it, no matter what concerns we might have, whatever concerns or stresses we might feel about knowing what the potential is of our students and wanting them to reach that and wanting to support them in that journey, keep it about your relationship. And setting goals also then sets mutual expectations. I know as a recovering perfectionist that the worst thing I could hear was just do your best. Because when I heard just do my best, I heard I have to get a 4.0. I never got a 4.0. I was stressed out every year. But when I came to a greater understanding of setting more mutual expectations with my parents, where I got to share what I felt capable of, I was able to feel a lot more success by delving into what my strengths were. I have a social studies license. I set it as a goal that I would get an A in every social studies class. I knew that math was a great challenge for me. I set that goal as a B. These were small components, short-term goals of my long-term goal of the GPA that I knew I needed to get into the college I wanted to get into. And that also setting goals and articulating steps teaches students how to plan. So in here, the first page has some instructional steps, some steps for kind of walking through these different goal setting templates. But if you turn, I am on the page for SMART goals. And so what I like about SMART goals is that it breaks down a big idea into the small steps that you take. So the first thing, making sure that things are specific. If we have a goal about attending college, so if we have a goal about attending college, then it can be helpful to look up general guidelines like EHS graduation requirements, which our counselors go through with every 9th grade student, but are also available on the high school registration pages. And that it's measurable, and so if you're working from some data like graduation requirements, it's very measurable how many math courses you need, how many English courses you need. And action-oriented, up here I wrote attainable, but it is action-oriented. I was doing that one from memory, and I guess my prefrontal cortex is still developing. So, action-oriented. Be specific in stating what it is that you're going to do. If you know that if a student knows that they have to have 6 language arts credits through EHS in order to be able to graduate, or maybe a better example in this case, they know that they have to have that 1 health credit somewhere between 9th and 12th grade, then it'd be an appropriate step to articulate, when is health going to fit into my schedule? And that they're real. So there's some interchangeable words. Sorry, relevant, realistic. But the realistic part is that it's got to be associated with the actual goal. So if you're writing a goal about those graduation requirements so that you can get into college, you don't necessarily, if you're focusing the goal on the graduation requirements, while an extracurricular is very important, that extracurricular might not fit in with relevancy, it might not be realistic towards solving the goal. Extracurriculars are phenomenal, I love them, they're important for college applications. But if the focus of the conversation is on graduation requirements, that can be an extra stressor, that can be an information overload considering something outside of the specific goal. And then time-bound or timely, however you'd like to look at it, but put a deadline on things. Goals are fantastic, but a goal without steps and a goal without a deadline is just a wish. And wishes are wonderful, but wishes don't get us anywhere. It's our goal setting, it's our planning that really take us through. And so SMART goals, another fantastic tool. Happy to share any more information beyond what I've shared already. But any questions about SMART goals, or, you know what? Actually, what would be really beneficial, just by somebody you're by, go ahead and think. You don't have to share your student, you don't have to share specifics about your students, but just with somebody near you, think about what is a type of goal that a middle schooler might be setting, or that you might like to set with your middle schooler. Could be school-bound, could be home-bound, could be anything. But just take 60 seconds, think about one, share it with somebody near you.
From my son, I just let him put in this computer. Crazy. Yeah. Which grade? Six.
I love the brainstorming. Does anybody have any helpful suggestions that others might benefit from hearing? You don't have to, but I love group thinking. So, an alternate to a SMART goal template would be this GPA, goal setting outline. And so in this case, GPA stands for Goal Plan Action. You can turn to that one. There are also examples of an activity we do in Avid called My College Roadmap, where we prompt them with a long-range goal. I've filled that in for you. And then an example of a filled-out goal-setting outline that articulates steps as well as the goal and the plan. Yes, please. So, what I like about this type of goal-setting plan is that they can build off of each other. Whether you choose to start with a short-range or long-range goal, completely appropriate. Usually short-range goal, I'm thinking about a month, something that'll happen like within the next testing cycle. Okay, we just concluded the Chapter 5 test. In geometry, Unit 6 is coming up, so what's going to happen in this time frame? Mid-range goal, I'm typically thinking about a semester length, perhaps a year, but long-range goal can be anything beyond that. And so, what I like is the idea of talking about that goal. What are you interested in? what are your favorite classes? What are your favorite subjects? What do you have questions about doing? What kind of jobs? We do some career inventories in Avid. They also, in our Ramp Up to Readiness, our advisories college preparation program, they also do career surveys in those settings. So most students in 1 or 2 of their years at Valley View Middle School come across some type of career inventory. But using that as a basis for their goal. And acknowledging that this is not a contract. The contract are the steps that you take. The contract is not the goal. The contract is the steps you take. Because goals can change, and that's appropriate, especially long-term goals. I know that with my Avid students last year when we did our college research project, it was really funny. About 80% of the kids picked the college or university that one of their parents went to, which is totally natural. It's that decision-making from the social, relational core part of the brain. What do I know? I know that my parents loved University of Minnesota. I know that my dad is a die-hard Wisconsin fan. And so that's where that initial decision-making part's going to come from. It's okay if that part changes, but we want to keep the college part, that part can be a contract. So the planning section then is a chance to just articulate the things that will go into the plan, but that action step, that's the really important part. That's where you can write out 1-sentence statements of, this is something I can do by when. I can attend a college informational session at EHS for the visiting college of University of Wisconsin Stout. I can send an email to the admissions counselor of University of Wisconsin Platteville. Or I can, yes, so the action step is going to be brief, succinct, I will by this time. And so I think that both of these tools are important then as our students are developing that cause and effect relationship, the deep thinking, critical thinking, problem solving part of their brain, especially when we focus on their goals in a positive, mutually agreeable manner. We have some time now that I'm available if you want to talk about any types of, if you want to talk about any specifics of your student, your relationship with your student, or how to go about goal setting with your students, this is the information I have to share. So I'm really happy to, I'm grateful for everybody who's come tonight, and I am happy to take any questions or comments or work with you one-on-one, whatever you'd like. I do want you to know that if you have a question later, maybe not a question now, I can be reached at my full name, email address, and the direct line to my office, 952-848-3418. And you can ask me general questions about the school. For my role as academic support supervisor, you can ask me specific questions about the AVID program. I'm the AVID coordinator at this school. If I don't know the answer, I will be happy to get you in touch with the person that does. But thank you very much for joining us. And so, if you need to leave, feel free to, but I'll just take questions as they come. Yes?
So the question around STEM.
Yes.
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yes.
In terms of positive self-image and students that are teenage girls and that kind of thing, where they're not necessarily focused on from the standpoint of seeing technology geeks and things like that. They don't see a lot of role models.
Mm-hmm.
So are there places where you can get information around and provide those role models that maybe commercials or television aren't sharing with them?
Yeah, and the creation of images in media is a big challenge because most of those creators are men. And most of those creators, there was a phenomenal documentary by the Oprah Winfrey Network called Misrepresentation, which does a fantastic job touching on the topic. I think I know it is a goal in our school to demonstrate and in our classrooms make sure we're showing representations of all the different types of engineers, all the different types of scientists. And I know that's a work in progress for our school. I wish I had a list for you. I just don't. But where I would approach it is if science, technology, engineering, math, if that is an interest of your student, if that's something where they're finding success, I would maybe transition it. Maybe it doesn't have to be about science, technology.
I'm not so concerned
Oh,
about
yeah.
that
Sure.
her interest in that.
Yes.
I'm more concerned about her interest being dissuaded from that
I
by
see.
not coming into a welcoming environment.
Absolutely.
And her enduring through
Mhm.
that. So I'm just wondering what kind of resources the school might have around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so more a question about kind of the resiliency component and when feeling challenged or when feeling like they don't fit, how do we bridge that? So, I think definitely we have lots of resources in the school, counselor and social worker for talking out kind of feelings and experiences. As far as in the classroom, I do think that is a completely appropriate thing to contact contact one of the project Lead the Way teachers. I also do know that so the STEM classes we have here, Intro to Engineering and Design, flight, space, electricity, green architecture, we are very fortunate that half of our STEM teachers are female. And that is often the way that we first approach trying to demonstrate the validity and strength of both sexes, of genders, races, in field, is through our hiring practices, and that has been an effort and a goal. And I think that's all I have for you at the moment. I'm sorry if that doesn't completely answer your question or completely solve the need. But I do thank you for asking.
Well, it sounds like you have role models from the teaching perspective, right?
That's the
that you
goal.
mentioned. So
That's the goal.
to the extent that they have role models in the teaching
Yeah.
of those engineers, I mean, that's something I didn't know, and that's helpful.
Absolutely. And we never hire somebody because of their race or because of their gender, but when we have an opportunity, to create a more equitable workplace and a workplace where students can see themselves in their teachers, we try to do that. Yes.
These tools are obviously used in the AVID program. I'm curious if they're kind of deployed
Yes.
elsewhere in the school. I mean, would my student look at these and, look at me sideways, or has he seen stuff like this?
Absolutely. So we do share in our professional development events. We do try and take AVID trainings, and AVID puts millions of dollars into research as of to what they try to deem as best practice. And when we learn those tools, we try to share those. So, for instance, some things that will be familiar is that at every grade level, students should be seeing Cornell notes. Perhaps not in every subject, but I do know that I can think of teachers in each grade level that definitively use this. I know the math teachers in 7th grade use this. The science teachers in 7th grade use a modified version of Cornell notes. The goal setting. The SMART goals are something that's a component of the Ramp Up to Readiness curriculum that we do in our advisories. And so yes, that is our goal. It's not universal throughout the building, but in each grade level, in pockets of each grade level, these strategies, these ideas are shared and are used because we feel heavily biased as the AVID coordinator, but I do feel that there's great validity in when you have a tool, a multi-use tool, that is accessible to students, and sharing that multi-use tool and allowing them to reuse and improve upon their ability with that tool. So the note-taking, the goal setting, yeah, those are absolutely parts of different components of our school at different grade levels. Yeah. We also work heavily on critical reading strategies that a lot of our students are doing in 6th grade reading and in many of their language arts and reading classes that they may not even know came from Avid. Numbering paragraphs, underlining claims, circling key terms, vocabulary frames that students do. The vocabulary frame being when you have a vocabulary word used in a sentence, an image, what the word is not, and then, I'm blanking on the last part, but a lot of those strategies where there's multiple repetitions and the concept of multiple repetitions, absolutely an Avid strategy that we push throughout the building as much as we can. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
So you work at this school?
Yes, I do. I'm in the main office, and my office is next to Dean Cornwell, and I've got kind of a jack of all trades position that I love. When I interviewed here, the description was that I get to help kids. So, I work in many aspects, and happy to help in any way I can.
So what AVID means?
Yes. So, thank you for asking. So, AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination, and AVID is a class that we have here, and it's a class that students apply for. Every student who applies gets an interview, and then in the interview, really our goal of the interview is to speak with the student about their individual determination, because AVID is a class about habits and skills and routines, but also that are tangible, that you can use in any class, that we feel makes students better students. Not every student needs AVID, and AVID is not a remedial class that will save anybody who needs lots of intervention. But it is an ideal class for students in the middle, students who are first to attend college, students with special circumstances that makes them need more of kind of a supportive family environment. And the focus in the class is writing, asking questions, working together, organization, and reading. And about half of the class is spent in something called tutorials, where a student will present what they're confused about, and their peers will ask them questions to lead them to their answer. So in AVID tutorials, we never give an answer. We only help lead the person with the question to the answer. So it's a class, but it also has a lot of strategies that we try to share with other parts of the building too. Yes. Thank you for
you
asking.
are the leader of the program?
Sort of. I'm the coordinator.
Okay.
Our teacher, Alyssa, well, we've got two teachers, Liz Berggren and Alyssa Kappel. Alyssa Kappel's been doing it the longest, and I feel like she's our leader. I'm a support to her. I'm a big support to her. Yeah.
And what Cornell notes?
And so Cornell Notes are the format you see in front of you. And Cornell Notes then is a system of taking notes where students take notes in this part during class. Then after class, they look at the information they have in the middle and they ask questions about it, because the ability to create a question is different than copying down information. It's a different part of the brain. So it's working on building connections between the questioning part of the brain and the receiving part of the brain. And then they summarize about a week later. And so by interacting with the notes once, twice, 3 times, and hopefully another time or two in here by adding in any missing information, they get in multiple repetitions of working with their notes. There's a lot of brain research that shows if I gave you 10 facts right now, and I asked you tomorrow to name those 10 facts, most people are able to give 5. Think about giving 5 out of 10, that's an F on a test. Regularly interacting with notes, once within 24 hours, once within about 15 minutes of receiving the information, once more within 24 hours, and again within a 1-week period, typically increases the retention rate up to about 85 or 90% in most students. It was, these were designed by a professor at Cornell who became frustrated that his students were failing his class.
So this for like use this school which is special class or use for the middle school student?
It's something that next year in our 6th grade middle school essentials class, every student will be getting. Every student who's in the AVID class is graded regularly on their Cornell notes. And some of our classes, but not all of our classes, are using them every day.
So
Yes.
means like more help the student to remember something.
Exactly. Yes.
But not every teacher use it. Just if they want to use it, they can use it, right?
At this point, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So my students going into 7th grade, is that when AVID is provided? or
That's
is
the
it-
first year of
That's
AVID,
what-
yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
so 6th
absolutely.
graders don't get it, but they can have it in 7th grade and beyond that?
Yes, so it's actually a program that extends until 12th grade. There's a number of benefits for staying in long term. Some of the biggest benefits being exposure to colleges and college research. We are this coming year trying to embed some of our 6th grade classes with core AVID essentials so that everybody can benefit from them, but also then that any student looking at participating in AVID already kind of has a leg up from where we started in the past. If you have any questions, any specific questions about the program, happy to answer them. And if your student is considering AVID, completely appropriate to register for it, and then that'll trigger the application interview process, and we can make a good informed decision. I'm part of the decision-making process, but we accept students by speaking with multiple teachers, the counselor, the AVID teacher, myself, and other people who have some experience determining, is this going to be a good fit for the student? Is the student beyond what we're going to be doing, or is the student not yet ready for the support that we can provide? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes. It's about 7:22. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. I appreciate your time.